Hi, I'm Renee Kaikinen, and this is my son Cody Elbro, and we're here today to talk about home health care. One of the reasons why we needed home health care was because Cody had surgery back in July, and he had a long leg cast on, and that cast ended up having a pressure sore by the heel, and then that got infected with a pretty serious infection that he ended up needing to have surgery again, and they took out a piece of the bone and then also part of the tendon. So we left the hospital with IV infusion and of antibiotics, and then also a wound care vac. And what the nurses did is, before we left the hospital, it was about 20 days there. They showed us how to do the IV infusion, all the safety precautions, and then with the wound vac, how to troubleshoot it and how to ensure it's working properly, and then when you need to know to call them for help. And they do have, like most places have, like a phone number you can call that's open 24/7, so you can ask questions, and then they can always send somebody out if it is something that they need to see, whether it's an evening or a weekend. And then of course, in an emergency situation, you're going to want to dial 911. After the hospital, we were talking about caring for someone in the home, going over some things like food, care, and fun. One of the most important things for healing is nutrition. You absolutely need that nutrition for healing. Well, somebody who's bedridden is not moving around as much, not using as much calories, so they may not want to eat as much. So what they're eating, you want to make sure it has their proteins and vitamins and things like that. One of the things that they sell, of course, over the counter is like Ensure and Boost. They have high protein and vitamin content, not vegetable content, but vitamins in a bottle. And the other one is whole milk, or any milk if you can't have the fat or the saturated fat. Now Cody, he's a skinny fellow, so he can afford to have the extra calories and eat as much as he wants. And so these are some things that you can use along with milk, nuts. Pumpkin seeds has protein, sunflower seeds, meat, of course, cottage cheese, eggs. And then for your vitamins also, there's things like you can get Joint Health, and then juices. Look for that 100% juice. And then they also make this Joint Health Emergency, and it comes in a little mix that you just mix in water, about 8 ounces of water, and then he likes it over ice. And then also important to drink to help absorb the medicines is water. And then if you have a kid like Cody, he likes everything blue. So you can color the water blue, and it'll help encourage that water to go down. Some of the things, that you have to do is, help them care. You want them to do as much as they can by themselves. So we'll bring them his toothbrush, we'll bring them his deodorant, for washing the hair, or a sponge bath, because he's still not allowed to take a shower. But, you want to have a wet washcloth, one that you're going to dip in, soap. I found that Johnson's body wash works pretty well. We just got this kind, but, some men and women may not want that, so you can get whatever they prefer. And then it's also important to have a washcloth for drying. So when you're washing, you want a wet one. Can I have your arm? You want to do one part of the body at a time. So you would wash the arm, first rinse it off, and then you would take the one with the soap in the water, and then you would wash that off. And then, of course, then you want to take one and then dry that part of the body. Now, the reason why you want to do it in parts is because they get cold, and it's in bed. And so if you do a section at a time, it's a lot more comfortable for the patient. And just, if they can do the stuff themselves, let them do it themselves, but you'll have to work with the patient to know what is going to be good for them or not good for them. And something else that you'll be dealing a lot with if you have anybody that's been in the hospital is usually Band-Aids, Band-Aids, and Band-Aids. So you'll have that adhesive that gets stuck on the skin or kind of gets worked in the skin, and then laying in bed and sweating and things like that doesn't help. And so you'll have adhesive you want to remove. Well, you can get like little skin pads in a packet. It's called Skin Prep, and you can use that. But what I found that works over the counter, you can just get witch hazel, or they also make this Hydrosealings. It's what you want to look for is, skin cleanser, and then you can usually get a bottle of this, pretty reasonable, and then some cotton balls. And then that's a cheaper way to go ahead and cleanse the skin without having to, buy all these little skin prep wraps that can add up to be pretty expensive for a long stay. Something else that you'll find that's, with the wheelchair. So Cody is wheelchair bound. So we have this wheelchair here. So when we're transferring him, each wheelchair has 2 buttons on the side, and you can lift up and take the arm off. By doing this, what happens is you have now an open side. So especially if they can't transition or move themselves, that just enables them to move over more easily to make it not as hard. The other thing that's important with the wheelchair is when you're transferring, make sure that the brakes are on, and then take the brakes off. Because otherwise, the worst thing that can happen is they're transferring, and if the brakes aren't on, the wheelchair can roll back or forward, and then they fall. And it can be hard to catch them, especially if you're the only person there, or, just because of, the strength and the mobility that person has. Now, with the wheelchair, the other thing is, I don't know how many times I looked at this thing. I looked at the sides, I was pushing it in. I'm looking over here on the bottom for a lever, trying to push it in. But an easy way to fold a wheelchair is just take the seat and lift it up in the middle. If you take the seat and lift it up in the middle, then that wheelchair folds for you. And then when it folds for you, you can go ahead and transfer it in your trunk or vehicle or things like that. Another thing that can happen is when somebody's in your house or in bed and things like that, they can have a lot of emotions. They can feel out of control, and so they may say things or do things that aren't really appropriate when you would just like a thank you. Just remember, that's the only thing they can control in the situation is their environment, so you just kind of have to let it roll off you and move on. Is that they're just frustrated with the situation, and it'll just make it easier if you just both just let it go and move on and keep on going. Some of the other things to remember, especially with smaller ones, is entertainment is the fun part. So we have things like Cody likes Legos, and then what's this? Puzzles, and then he also likes his Netflix and books, and then visitors, company. He likes company and visitors, and things that make his music. And for a boy, you can get this fart blaster, and he finds that quite entertaining, and it can break up any crabby mood. And so it's time to recap. Some of the things that you can do is share some of these tips with friends and family. You never know when they're in that situation. The nutrition, protein, vitamins, care. Let them do as much as they can by themselves. You want to encourage that self-care, but also be there to assist them and try to make it as comfortable as possible. Places that you can go to help for questions is the place that discharges a person from the hospital generally will give you some contact names and some resources and things like that. But then we also have a website sponsored by our government. It's www.hhs.gov. And then if you go to the tab Families, Information, and then the bottom of the site, Home Health Agencies Compare, and then it's hosted by Medicare.gov. And you can go in there and actually it gives like different ratings and different stars of what different home health care agencies offer in your area. So that can be very useful depending on what your needs are, just because the things can vary so much. And the site is done by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Well, I'd like to thank you for spending the time with me today and learning this information. And we will say goodbye for now. You want to say goodbye, Cody?
Bye.
Bye. See you next time.